The Ways and Means Committee meeting is now called to order. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Cruzen. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer.
Present.
Vice Chairman Williamson. Here. Alderman Moore. Here. Alderman French.
Present.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Carter. Chairman Kennedy.
Here.
8 present. You have a quorum.
We're excusing the alderman from the 27th.
Duly noted.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. After our last meeting, it was pointed out to us that if we had no changes to the budget, we could have just passed the bill out directly to the Board of Aldermen. But since that time, I understand there are some technical changes from the budget director. So the first thing we need to do is to reconsider our vote from the last meeting. And then we'll deal with the technical changes and any other changes or recommendations and amendments. We can entertain a motion for reconsideration.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded that we can reconsider our vote. There's been a second for that vote. For that motion, Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderwoman Cruzen.
Aye.
Alderwoman Florida.
Aye.
Alderwoman Behringer.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Williamson.
Aye.
Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderman French.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Carter. Chairman Kennedy.
Aye.
8 aye votes. The motion is reconsidered. Board Bill 1 stands before you.
Okay, I believe we could have the budget director before us.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members of the committee. I have two proposed amendments to the budget of a technical nature. The first, and I'll take these in any random order, is to provide the line item detail for the Metro Parks Capital Neighborhood Parks, as well as the ward account of the half-cent sales tax capital. These are the line item details which were not available at the time when we proposed the budget, but have since been determined. So that is included in a packet with that amendment. There is a second amendment that relates just to the Forest Park sub-account of the major parks as well as the half-cent capital account that it includes language pertaining to the expenditure of revenues accruing to those accounts. The Forest Park debt service agreement is somewhat unusual in that it's not a fixed dollar amount, but it's based on the actual dollar amounts that come in. So what this language would do is if revenue comes in excess of the budgeted amount, that those amounts too would also be applied to debt service. So that's what that, it's an unusual debt service agreement, but that's consistent with the ordinance as well as the maintenance agreement with Forest Park. And so those are the two amendments.
Okay, let's take the amendment dealing with Metro Parks. And that would be amendment number 1. Let me see.
Line item.
The line item.
Okay.
That would be amendment number 1, making the other one amendment number 2.
Correct.
We can take any questions on amendment number 1. Alderwoman Cruzen. Alderwoman Florida.
No questions.
Alderwoman Behringer.
No questions.
Alderman Williamson.
No question.
Alderman Moore.
No question.
Alderman French.
One quick question. So these projects listed, are these ready to go projects, actually approved with the aldermen, or are these just suggestions from the Parks Department?
No, these have been worked with both the Parks Committee for the Parks, neighborhood parks, as well as the liaison with BPS with the individual aldermen.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Alderman Cruzen, you want to follow up on that question?
I'm sorry. I have no questions on this either. I thought this is number 1 we're talking about right now. And
It's a line item.
it's the one with all the work capital improvement.
Yes. Alderman Vaccaro, any questions? Any other questions from members of the committee? Alderman Moore?
Yes, I'm doing speed reading here, but I don't see my park reflected in here by any means, and I have requested lots and lots of work to be done on both the little parks. They're about a block wide, and I don't see them expressed in there at all. We made some great promises about Tandy Park and Rumble Park. I don't see them in here at all.
My understanding is that is in Fund 1122, the Special Parks Funds, which is separate from the capital budget itself. These are funds for the neighborhood parks of Metro Parks Fund 1219 and the half-cent sales tax funds, which for the ward accounts. The other neighborhood parks piece is a line item in Fund 1122, which is not included in this packet.
Okay.
Any other questions from members of the committee? We are asked to be sure to speak into the microphone. If there's no other questions, we can entertain a motion for amendment number 1.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we adopt amendment number 1. Any questions on or discussion on the motion? Been requests for previous roll. Any opposition to previous roll? Seeing none, by your vote, we have adopted amendment number 1. Amendment number 2. Any questions on amendment number 2? Alderwoman Cruzen. Alderwoman Florida.
No questions.
Alderwoman Behringer.
No questions.
Alderman Williamson.
No questions.
Alderman Moore.
No questions.
Alderman French.
No questions.
Alderman Vaccaro. Okay. This is correcting language or putting in?
It's
new language?
adding language to
Adding
the
language.
preamble.
Okay.
Dave.
Right. If we have no questions, we can entertain a motion.
Previous roll.
Been moved and seconded that we pass out amendment number 2. There's been a request for previous roll. Any opposition to previous roll? Seeing none, by your vote, you have adopted amendment number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. You might want to hang around for us. As I mentioned before, I would give an opportunity to see if there were any other amendments or changes, and we can do so at this time. I know the last time we didn't have any. Do we have anything else?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I did have a amendment, and I think the clerk is making copies.
They're making copies?
Yes, they're making copies.
Okay. We'll take a 3-minute break waiting on the copies.
Okay.
Alderman French?
All right, thank you. So the voters approved a few years ago, actually, I've got the ordinance here, Ordinance 67794. It was approved back in 2007. And in the ordinance approved by the tax increase approved by voters, it specifically said that every year, $1 million shall annually be allocated for crime prevention programs to administered by resolution of the St. Louis Board of Aldermen with approval of the Public Safety Committee and overseen by the city's Public Safety Department. I can't remember any time, at least within the last 5 years, maybe ever, that voters have gotten what they approved for, which was $1 million going towards this fund. We understand that there is some administrative costs. There's about $52,000 that goes to pay for a person in public safety to administer the program. But that other $950,000, what seems to happen every year is that is one of the first sources that gets tapped to fill budget holes. And I just think that, you know, when voters elect to tax themselves, and especially with regard to public safety, that they need to get what they're paying for. These programs can go a long way to help and improve public safety in our community. They really act to inspire some original thinking in the way of youth crime prevention. Some of our really most active and innovative nonprofits look forward to being able to apply for this every year, and that pot just gets smaller and smaller. This year has been cut down to half of what it was supposed to be. And I think what you look at what's going on in our streets, and especially with the regard to even decreasing the funding for the police department as far as money actually going to police on the streets, this is a small investment that goes a long way. So I'd like to see us restore that.
We're trying to follow your writing here. It's a little bit confusing to us.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
So it's my understanding the intent is...
Oh, yeah, sorry. That should be a 9. So it's increasing, yeah.
Okay.
There you go. There you go. So make
So
that
we're-
4.
I don't get it.
We're trying to get it together.
The increase is from 500,000 to 948,000.
Okay.
948. So the 448 is what was taken out of it. We want to add that back. So it should be 948.
085.
948.
085.
85
Right.
is what that number should be.
Yes.
And
And
we're all over here trying to figure it
that
out.
4
for
should
a
be a
moment.
9.
So,
Makes a difference.
so that's a big difference.
Makes a difference.
Yes. Yeah.
So the point is that this amount was taken out of that fund,
Right.
and you would like to see it placed back into that fund.
Yes. It was tapped to fill a budget hole in drug courts, and I think drug courts is a noble program, and I would like to see, you know, funding added to drug courts, and maybe the budget director can help with some of the maybe proposed reductions that we'll have after this amendment to maybe restore that money from another source to drug courts. But this public safety money goes a long way. It's in the scheme of our entire budget, and actually in the scheme of the entire amount raised from that sales tax approved by voters, $1 million is a very small amount, and they should at least get that on the streets.
Questions?
Yeah.
Alderman Cruzen?
So you're proposing to take the drug court subsidy line 5659547 to 0? Is that what I'm reading here? And to make the 5659000, the professional services, $1 million, or $948,085? Is that what
I'm not proposing at this time to change the drug court subsidy line. What I'm proposing first with this amendment is to increase back to its original amount, the amount for the public safety grants, with some accompanying proposed reductions from other sources. Hopefully we will reach that 448,000 mark, and that can be restored to drug courts if that is a priority of the committee.
And are you getting ready to propose those cuts
Yes,
next?
yes.
You'd like to see those?
I sort of
Right.
would. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't like for professional services to have 948,000. That's great, if we knew where to get the other 450,000 from. So,
We can take a
just from
moment.
my own point of view, it would be hard for me to vote to
Right.
increase something by 448,000 without knowing where the money was coming from. So, I'd leave that up to you,
I
but
can
that's
take-
my comment.
We can take a moment for you to,
Yeah, I'm open to us taking maybe a 5-minute break to draw up these other reductions and get the clerk to make copies.
surely. We're fine with that.
Okay?
Let's take about 5 minutes.
Okay.
I believe we're ready to reconvene. Alderman French? If
Yes.
you would explain it now for us.
Sure. So, my original amendment here, amendment number 3, proposes to restore the $448,000 to the professional services of the Public Safety Sales Tax Crime Prevention Program. So those are the grants that the Public Safety Committee awards annually to help curb youth violence in the city. As I mentioned before, voters approved language for that fund to get $1 million every year. We have not gotten that almost any year ever that I can recall, but definitely within the last 5 years. So the question is, where do we get the money from? That $448,085 amount to be restored. I've got 2 proposed amendments that would fund $135,000 of that, and that would come from tourism and convention fund subsidies. One is to a small portion, a really small amount to Grand Center, $60,000, which is probably 1% of their budget or something over there, and $75,000 to the Sister Cities program, which I'm sure most citizens don't really know too much about, or what benefit we get from that. And if we had to prioritize, I think those might be 2 good places to start with. I'm open to some suggestions about other amounts to eventually find that additional $335,000 or $313,000. That could be a cut to the subsidy for drug courts, or it could come from another source. I'm completely open to that. In the meantime, if for the purposes of recommending a balanced budget to the Board of E&A, I am open to reducing that amount of increase to the professional services program.
So then, as opposed to saying that it would be increased up to $948,000, it would be, what, $635,000?
That's a start. I would think that maybe the committee can also send over a letter to the Board of E&A voicing our support for the idea that that fund is completely restored, and maybe the budget director can work with the Board of E&A to find some of that extra money beyond these recommended cuts. I know one thing that we have done on the committee in the past, though, is that we have sent over recommendations that have not been completely balanced, and again, these are just recommendations, and then the Board of E&A, along with the Budget Division, tries to appease both the will of the committee and the needs of the city.
Questions from members of the committee? Alderwoman Cruzen.
Alderman French, what is, I guess, the Sister Cities program, the $75,000 in the Grand Center, you chose them because?
Well, they came out of the Convention and Tourism Fund. They were very small subsidies. I know to Grand Center that $60,000 subsidy is a very tiny portion of their total budget over there, and I think that money would go a much longer way, a much further way in to helping curb youth violence in the city.
And Sister Cities?
Well, Sister Cities is that might be a legacy program or something, but it's not something that the citizens of the city, I think, get a big benefit out of, especially when you're talking about balancing crime prevention programs and violence in our streets. And again, the way this thing usually works is these are recommendations, obviously, just recommendations to the Board of E&A. If the mayor's office, the comptroller, and the president's office feel that restoring those cuts to the sister cities is a higher priority, they'll either refuse the recommendation or sometimes find the money from another source.
Okay. No further questions.
No further. Alderwoman Florida.
Thank you. Could we ask the budget director to comment on these cuts, please, so that we have a better understanding of what would occur if we were to cut $75,000 from sister cities and $60,000 for the Grand Center subsidy?
Could you come forward? I can't see you.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes, the Convention and Tourism Fund is a fund funded by the 1-cent restaurant tax in the city. There are currently 3 line items funded out of that budget. Ostensibly, they're for tourism purposes by ordinance.
Right.
The big dollar amount you see there in the budget is called a pass-through, and that is a pass-through to general revenue, which is then utilized to pay debt service on the convention center. And the other 2 items were related to convention tourism items, which were Grand Center and as well as our Sister Cities program. I can't speak to too many details about either. The Grand Center, obviously, as you're familiar, has been involved with development of the Grand Center region, and I know they have advocates for their continued subsidy. Sister Cities program is an international program for which we establish ties to various cities throughout the world and work with them both on a cultural as well as economic exchanges. And it's been, both of those subsidies were the only 2 subsidies we've had from the C&T fund for a number of years.
Okay, can we divert 1111 to a public safety? That would be my other question, since by ordinance these funds were supposed to be related to convention and tourism.
You cannot use C&T funds for public safety.
That's what I thought.
You could redo. You could.
Well, that would be it would actually be a reduction in the amount to general revenue.
What theoretically what you would be wanting to do then in that instance is that you'd be reducing those 2 line items and then increasing general revenue, the pass-through amount.
Item.
Okay, so what you would actually do is, in addition, you would increase the amount to general revenue by 135.
That's correct.
And then 135 would then come out of general revenue and go to the public safety.
You could do that.
Okay. No more questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Can we? Here's a question directly to Paul. You're next.
No, I guess it would be directly to Paul. Sorry.
Okay. Alderman Vaccaro.
Paul, just a question, just so I understand. And I know Antonio's saying that it's a recommendation, but if I remember, and I just want to be clear so I know, isn't it if we take money out of one department and we recommend it go to another department, that they can not do our recommendation, but they can't put that money back into the department we took it from?
You can reduce a line item,
right,
and that does not require additional approval. If you are to increase a line item, you can only do that upon the approval of E&A. So what you are doing is recommending, if you recommend an increase in a line item, that line item can only be added or increased upon agreement with E&A.
But if we recommend a decrease, they can't say, no, you can't decrease that. They can't. My understanding is if we recommend a decrease, they don't have to accept where we want it to go, but they can't put it back. They can't say, no, you can't.
You would have to change your amendment in order to restore that, yes.
Okay, so it's not a recommendation in a sense. If we cut something, it's cut.
It's cut.
Okay, thanks. I wasn't sure.
Alderwoman Behringer.
I don't have anything for Paul Payne. I just have
Oh, yeah, for
for the sponsor of the amendments. I had some questions.
Let me see. Before you sit back down, are there any other questions right now for Paul Payne? Alderman Williams.
I just have a question of the Budget Director. Paul, I want to ask you about the drug court. And I think it's $400,000 is coming from a proposition that's going to drug court. And just kind of briefly, why is it that we're trying to, what was the reason for the shortfall? Was that use tax when it comes to the drug courts, or did they come out of general revenue?
It's out of general revenue, and as if you remember from the presentation, there's a number of things that we're doing to try to keep the budget balanced, and it's just a matter of how much revenue is available and where does it exist so that we can contain a balance. And so that was simply a budget balancing measure, among others.
And that 400,000, what is it exactly used for? Is that salaries, or does it come?
I believe it's a number of things, contractual services as well. They have a program where they bring individuals who have been convicted of drug crime offenses, and work them through a program so that they don't, so they avoid incarceration. And I believe that's some of that involves contractual services, and some of that is personnel.
Okay, all right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions of Paul Payne?
Yeah, I have one more question, Paul.
Paul.
So with regard to drug court, that's its own department of fund on page 131. So in addition to this amount from the public safety sales tax, they get about $78,000 from general revenue?
Correct.
So their total budget is what, $500,000?
Yes, about that.
And do they have any other sources of funds?
I believe in years past they had some grant funds, but I think those have expired over the years. But those two, from numbers from my understanding, it would be the total request from the circuit court to the city for funding the program.
Okay.
Alderman Moore?
Because of the crime prevention funds here, that $1 million, is that why we gave the 448 to the courts, because of that increase with the crime prevention money? Where did they get their monies from before?
I believe in the earlier years there was a mixture of general fund subsidy as well as grant funds. A couple of years back the grant funds started drying up, and the increase, and so but the budget stayed the same. So when they requested the similar budget amount, we went to the crime prevention funds to pick up that slack.
Well, you know, Paul, we applaud the drug courts and what they're doing over there, but before they get to the courts, we need some of that money in those wards as well, and we've been divvying up on these funds, and I think that it has a special use in our communities before it even get down to the drug court. That's why we're a little kind of apprehensive about just dropping it all in like that, and wondering where and why we can't go back to the sources prior to this before the $448,000.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I believe a part of that was grant funds that no longer are there.
I'm sure because you moved towards the crime fund, but seemingly we can be more innovative in finding other grants that would help us out with the drug court, so we don't have to rob Peter to pay Paul. Paul. Okay.
Maybe.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that we have no other questions for you right now. We do have someone from the Sister Cities program here.
Oh, great.
Who could come up. Please, Mr. Tim Nowalk.
Very good.
I did pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, if you could just explain what, the city provides $75,000 to Sister Cities program.
Right.
And as I mentioned to you just a moment ago, I did sponsor the resolution for City of St. Louis to have the Sister City of St. Louis Synagogue.
Right.
So if you would explain a little bit what that money is for.
Yeah, and we were chatting briefly. Just to be clear, I'm the executive director of the World Trade Center St. Louis, and we act as the international division for St. Louis County and St. Louis City Economic Development. Part of our work is with the Sister Cities programs. Back in 2007, the St. Louis Center for International Relations came under our umbrella, and with it the 15 sister cities that St. Louis has. So the funding, $75,000, is used with a little more than $300,000 that comes from St. Louis County for our work. It's a portion, a very small portion of our overall budget, but it does provide some critical resources for us to properly receive many international delegations throughout the year. Just last week, the mayor helped us to host 2 visiting ambassadors from Vietnam, and from Mongolia. In 2 weeks, we will host a delegation from our sister city in Suwa, Japan. These funds allow us to provide small grants to each of the sister cities and to provide the administrative support to properly receive these delegations. So it's a, by comparison, it is a relatively small number combined with funding from important funding from St. Louis County, and then half or a little more than half of our overall budget does come from the business community. So it's an investment by many, again, to properly position St. Louis on an international scale.
How much does St. Louis County put in?
All totaled, a little more than 300,000.
Okay. Alderman Cruzen, did you have any?
No, thank you.
Okay.
No questions. Thanks for the explanation.
Were there any other questions? For
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, so you say it's a very small portion of your total budget. About how much is your budget?
It's about $1 million.
Okay. So it looks like that this small subsidy has been steady over the years, 75, even in years when other departments or areas of the city budget decreased. Since it is such a small portion, isn't it something that you can make up through grants or fundraising?
We couldn't. We you know, if I had my druthers, we would obviously look for an increase. We've seen an increase in the activity, and it's, again, not just sister cities, but it is truly international economic development. It is providing the proper support for the entire region to receive both dignitary and business delegations, to allow each of these committees, there's separate committees for each of these sister cities, a small amount of funding to do their work, mainly on a volunteer basis, but to do their work to promote exchanges and, in the long run, business development. So, no, the funding, make no mistake, the funding is critical, and I think it's it shows a combined county-city effort towards promoting this region for international trade and international exchange.
Mr. Chairman.
I was going to take it in order after him. Alderwoman Behringer, did you have anything?
Well, I want to first thank Tim Nowak for getting over here so quickly, because my concern has to do with in the past, so I can't speak of when I served on Ways and Means. The one thing that was very important was that if you were going to come up with adding money somewhere else, you had to figure out where to cut money somewhere else. And I would like us to be more thoughtful when we're trying to cut, that we don't look for the unintended consequences, such as the fact that we are in partnership, correct, with St. Louis County, so they as well are putting money into this program.
Absolutely.
Right. And it wouldn't look right on the part of the city if we're benefiting from it and we're not at least doing our share to fund it. So I would also like to express the fact that if you are going to cut funding, that at least that those people that will be cut have a chance to know that they're not blindsided. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Alderman Williamson?
No question.
Alderman Moore?
The city definitely needs to be more mindful as to where they cut. Radical changes such as taking that amount of money out of that crime prevention is needed everywhere and needed all over our wards. We're saying everybody wants their cut. Everybody wants their little piece of the pie. Nobody wants to give up anything. Sometimes we have to make those sacrifices, and the amount of money that you guys are receiving, over $5 million, look like we can look in there and find some other way of funding the Sister Cities program instead of taking such a radical change out of the crime prevention monies. So I would think that when we're making these changes, we should consider that as well as what those wards need. Our needs are detrimental to the city as well. So I can understand that you come to defend your part of it and look like you're a little winded, look like you got a phone call and they said, hey, get over here, they're about to take your $75,000 and you pop in the door. But I am just as adamant about this change in the crime prevention as you are with the sister cities. Thank you.
Alderman French has something else. If not, we're going to Alderman Vaccaro.
No question.
Okay. Then. Right. We thank you then.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And again, I appreciate your support, and we look forward to continuing the work to raise the profile of St. Louis on an international scale. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You were explaining all of the.
Yeah, I would just like to say too that you know, it takes away nothing from the work that these two organizations do. What it is, this whole budget process is about priorities, and these small amounts to their large, much larger budgets, I think go a lot farther when they fund small crime prevention programs that really target youth in the city. I think that is a much higher priority for the city of St. Louis. It is a crisis, what's going on with our youth, especially with regard to violent crime. And so, you know, we really are facing a choice here where it's give a $75,000 grant or a $60,000 grant to organizations that have means, that have much larger budgets, or send that back to general revenue and then allow us to fully fund, or at least better fund, what voters specifically approved, which they wanted, and they were willing to dip into their pockets to pay extra money so that we would be able to send money to these programs to be able to fund. So hopefully they would have an impact on our on the quality of life. Now, there were some other things that were clearly outlined in the ballot language that people voted for in that. A couple of those things included they were willing to pay for additional police officers to get up to a level of 1,400. Never got that. The $1 million to go towards crime prevention programs every year. They don't get that. That actually was in the bill. I have the ordinance here. It was on the language. And I just think that, you know, we need to start honoring. You know, we appeal to people's emotions to get them to pay more money with regard to crime, with regard to other things, parks, but then we don't honor the commitment. And I think, you know, we need to really take that seriously here.
Okay, so on Amendment 3, that would really be changed from the 948 to 635. I'm correct.
Okay, I'm willing to do that. So we're going to amend.
On Amendment 3, you know, it says from 500,000 to 948, it would really be to 635.
So do I need to make a motion to amend the amendment, or do I just change it? Dave?
Yeah, we'll just make that change.
Okay. So 635.
635.
085 still.
600, just change it.
No, it would just be 635, not 085.
Okay.
Because he's only taking the 135.
And then if we are to make these two cuts as recommended by the budget director, then we would also have to do an additional amendment and take the 135 and actually add it to the pass-through line. You understand? So we would actually be, since the tourism dollars can't be directly reallocated, what we would be doing is reducing the tourism fund by the subsidy 75, the other subsidy 60, and then adding that total 135 back to the pass-through amount on page 147. Mm-hmm. So that would be a larger contribution from that tax fund to general revenue, and then from general revenue, the 135 would come back out.
That's a separate.
That's a separate one. So
Right.
that would be one we would have to do if these are approved.
Okay, let's go back to Amendment 3. See if there's any other further questions. If not, we'll see if we have them. Okay. Alderwoman Cruzen?
It's Amendment 3 that's before us right
Yes.
now that we're
Mhm.
talking about. That would change the line item for public safety professional services from 500,000 to 635.
To 635.
And this would go over to E&A as a recommendation. This is a question, as a recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that.
Alderwoman Florida?
I have no question.
Okay. Alderwoman Behringer?
I just have one question, the amendment's sponsor. Did you happen to go to the Convention and Tourism Luncheon that was held a couple weeks ago?
No, I didn't.
Okay. The only reason I bring that up, and I apologize because I don't have numbers in front of me, is that we are given how much money convention and tourism brings into our city, and then if you look at where that goes into the taxes, the hotel taxes, the jobs, it's a pretty significant number. And so I just want to make sure that if that's something you need, information you need to see the convention and tourism, that I'm sure they would give that to you. But it was
No.
given to us at the luncheon.
No, and convention and tourism's, you know, their amount is not being decreased. They, let's see, we had actually they have a significant increase in the pass-through amount from $4.5 million in 2012 to this year $5.4 million.
But all of this, these programs also are part of that. It's promoting St. Louis. So that's all. I just didn't know if you had been there and seen the presentation they gave us.
I did not attend that luncheon.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Alderman Williamson?
Just a comment. I think Alderman French brings up some very good points, especially when it comes to public safety. And, you know, nobody wants to see convention and tourism or anyone, Sister City gets cut. But since I've been elected here on the board and over the last 3 or 4 years, when we passed the Proposition S money, that was something that the taxpayers, our residents, were in the impression that it would help crime on the front end. I know I have several different nonprofit organizations in my community that really stress very heavily that they need some funding, and it really does help. It works. Anytime you can give the children and some of the youth in our neighborhoods something positive to do, which needs funding so those organizations can operate to reach out to our community, it does help and it does abate crime. So I just hope that we can reconsider, and you know, I think the recommendation that he's making is fair. We haven't received the total $1 million that we have asked the voters to vote on to help our community, and we felt the pain. We feel the pain every year. So, you know, we're in a very, you know, dilemma, very serious dilemma when it does come to, you know, reallocating these funds. But I think the Proposition S money has, you know, taken a toll over several years, and we really haven't received the full benefit from that $1 million. And I think it's time that we, you know, come back around and restore some of those nonprofits and community organizations in our community so we can help abate crime and have some positive input in our neighborhood. That's all.
Alderman Moore? No. Okay. Alderman Vaccaro?
Mine's just more of a way of a comment.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the crime prevention money is important. Our ward capital is important. Last week I didn't support changes to the budget, and I'm not going to support any this week. What I do say, and that I said last week, and I'll say it again, that we need to send a clear message to the budget department that next year's budget comes to us without our ward capital put back, without the public safety money put back. Then we'll recommend deep, strong cuts, whether it's 1% or 2% across the board. But this public safety money, I agree, is important and needs to be restored. Our ward capital's been cut again and again, and down to $214,000. We can't even get our streets fixed properly. We would have to sit down and spend the next 3 months straightening this budget out. I'm fine with it the way it is, but if this budget comes back to us next year without these things restored, then I say that that's when we should strike back, and the cut should be deep and strong, and we need to send a message beforehand to the department that puts this together that we inspect the next year's budget, comes back with 100% of the public safety money restored, with 100% of our ward capital money restored, that they're not going to balance the budget off of the crime prevention money in our ward capital funds. And that's, so I'm just so you know, I support what you're saying. I just can't support making changes because, one, it's insignificant. $130,000 is not enough to make that real difference. And it's going to take a lot more. It's going to take restoring that back to its $1 million where it should be. And it's going to take restoring our ward capital to get us going back in the right direction in our neighborhoods to make the corrections we need in our neighborhoods to keep our neighborhoods strong. And I know you don't. I know you work hard for your neighborhood. We all do, and I know this is important to you. But just so you understand why, and again, I think by whether we do it by resolution or how we do it, we send a clear message. If the budget comes back next year without those things restored, then we'll make deep cuts and be prepared.
Alderman French.
Yeah, if I can. So, Alderman Vaccaro, we have spent 4, almost 5 weeks here examining the budget, listening to the hearings, listening to what different departments have to say. If you send back a bill or send back a budget with 0 changes, that sends a message. And I think it sends a message opposite of what you're saying that you want to send. You have an opportunity here to make some changes that reflect your priorities. If you want to propose an amendment to restore or recommend restoring some of our cuts that were made to ward capital, I will completely support that. The addition to the public safety fund here is not insignificant. I want it to be restored fully. And I wish that there was the will here by all of us to do that. But the $135,000 I'll settle for. Right now, I'm still going to work on the members of the Board of E&A to fully fund it before this budget is finally approved. But the $135,000 represents 13% of that amount restored. That represents probably 2 or 3 programs that are going to be funded. Based on some of the last year's funding, that might be 100 or 200 more kids that have programs, and that goes a long way. And it's tough for me to, the $1 million is a small amount. It's even a small percentage of the total tax that they approved, and we can't give citizens that. If we ever got to the point where we funded the full $1 million, that would have a huge impact on the youth of our city. That would serve probably 2,000 or 3,000 kids. And so if I can only get an extra 100 or 200 right now, I'll ask you to support that. And I think that would send a message to the Board of E&A, and that would send a message to the Budget Division that this is a priority. But if we constantly approve these budgets and allow that to be tapped, then that's sending the opposite message than I think you would want to send.
I don't disagree, but...
Continue.
I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
Okay. I don't disagree, but... And I know we had 5 weeks in the past, and I've been on this committee since the beginning that I've been down here for the last 4 years. This is my 5th year. We've always seemed to discuss things. We kind of knew we had time. This was kind of a shock this morning. I was told we were coming back to make some technical changes because we had passed it out to go back to E&A as opposed to passing it straight out to the floor. I haven't had even enough time to see what cuts, these are also, again, the taxpayers made, and, maybe we could look through and find better sources to find ways to fund other things. The other way, like I said, if we're going to go, you know, I still say the message is next year, if it comes back, and I plan to be on this committee unless I drop dead, you know, next year when it comes back, if it doesn't come back with those things restored, then I think we go with across-the-board cuts to every department to get it back. But I just don't know. I don't know what impact this is going to have. If we don't fund the sister cities and the county does, what's going to prevent the county from saying, if they're not going to do it, why should we do it? I'm just saying, I don't know. It might not be a bad thing to cut. I just don't know that it's a good thing to cut. I don't have a good answer. I wish I would have had more time. Usually, and I'm not saying that, I know you were just looking at stuff this morning, but usually in the past, if somebody was going to cut something, they'd call and say, hey, Joe, can I get your support? I'm going to cut this, and then I would look, and then I'd call them back and say, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. You know, and I know then it got a little hot and heavy at some of them with the cuts that went on at the last second, but I just don't know what impact this is going to have.
So, Joe, I'll just say this, is that this doesn't end today, okay? So we make a recommendation for an increase to the Board of E&A. We make a cut. If the Board of E&A does not like our cut, they can ask us to restore it, and I'm sure that in exchange for that, they will have restored the funding to the thing that we asked to be restored. So this is kind of a negotiation right now between this committee and the Board of E&A. But we have to make clear what we want, or that we want something. And for me, it is the thing worth fighting for is this public safety money. Now, a close second is that ward capital, because I think our priorities have gotten completely out of whack. You know, I voted against a couple of these last park tax increases, because right now we've gotten to a situation where my ward has O'Fallon Park, and O'Fallon Park has more money than the rest of the entire ward. So that, to me, is priorities out of whack. When I've got streets that need to be repaved, alleys that you can barely drive down, the College Hill neighborhood, which we just picked up in redistricting, could spend the whole $200,000 in that neighborhood alone. But somehow I've got money sitting over there in Park that I would love to be able to spend across the street in the alleys of the houses that look at the park. So I think we've gotten a little out of whack in that. So if you were to propose an increase to the ward capital, I would completely support that.
I agree. I mean, I sat there and argued because I have the same situation. I got the park with extra money, but the street on the edge of the park looks like total, you know, so they patched it. But I asked if I can use park money to pave it since it's attached to it, and the answer is no. Yeah. So I agree. The ward capital is just an important issue. But again, I agree with everything you're saying. I just think we have different thoughts on how to go about getting what we want. Thank you, though.
Alderman Moore.
Yes, if not the sister cities, then what? What have we been doing for all these weeks sitting here? And I think it would be incumbent upon each one of us to, if we don't want to do sister cities, like I said, everyone wants their little piece of the pie. No one wants to give up anything. That we all should go back and come back one more meeting. You know, I didn't want to come to this meeting today, but we should all go back and come up with something where we can pull something down to make this, put the crime prevention back into perspective that it needs to be, because if we don't have crime prevention in these communities, we might not even have tourism, because the wards are going wild and the kids are out of hand, and we need to continue to work on programs that will help even out to get them to act better, and the programs are essential to these communities and essential to our city. And I'm sure we can dig a little deeper and find other cuts that will balance this thing out and stop tapping the crime prevention funds so radically. But if, like I said, Joe, if not the sister cities and the other cuts, then what?
Did you look at
I'm inquiring you.
Right, and you looked at the budget over the last 5 weeks. Did you find anything else?
No, I'm saying it's incumbent upon all of us to find something to, have you found something?
No, I made it clear from the beginning that I didn't have a problem with the overall budget other than the ward capital. And I agree with Alderman French that the public safety money needs to be restored. But I made it clear last week, we went through this last week and there were no problems with the budget the way it was. I didn't look for cuts. I looked through there and the whole budget, everything, it looked like a lot of departments were cut by about 1% to start with. It looked like, you know, the people here deserved a 2% raise, so they got that. That kind of cut into the money. And to actually come up with an answer without sitting down with the budget department and really working through this, I didn't. The same way, I don't know, if you have another answer, I'm willing to listen, but I did look through the budget, and I sat in the meetings. I asked questions of all the heads of the departments if I had questions to ask, the same way everybody on this committee did, at least the departments that came in front of us. Every department gave a pretty good reason why their budget needed to be the way it was, what cuts were made in their budget, and what they're doing in the future. At no point, other than this morning, did anyone come up and tell me really start looking through here and try to find a way to make a cut. I'm sure if we look hard enough, we could probably find some. I'd like to call the heads of departments, if that's the case, to see what would, if I took away, you know, like the parks got all that new money. I'd like to talk to Gary Best. Say, hey, Gary, what if, you know, before I just start making cuts up here and then getting phone calls tomorrow saying, why'd you cut this particular department? Yeah. I'm not opposed to having another 1 or 10 more meetings, but before I start making random cuts that I'm not sure what that cut is or who it affects, I want to be able to talk to the heads of these departments so I make intelligent cuts and intelligent decisions. In the past, we've done that. I know that we've cut overtime out of budgets, which seem to make sense. You know, that's my thing on it, you know. And again, I had the same opportunity. We all had to go through this and talk to the department heads, and everyone gave a good reason why their budget needed to stay intact. If I'm being asked to make cuts, then I need to talk to department heads so that I can make an intelligent decision.
We all have our problems in each one of these wards, and one of my priorities is crime prevention. It's just like every department that came through, even though we asked the questions, it's just like, you know, like the word on page 47, like passing through, passing them on, just passing it. Everyone come with the same thing, and we don't really get into the line items to find out exactly what it is. We can cut 15, 20,000, 5,000 until we get back to the crime prevention, because if we continue with this crime, you know, we're going to run out of time.
I agree, and I have a lot of respect for you. You know that.
Well, that's all I have to say.
You know, and again, I have a lot of respect for you, and I agree that this is a priority. But I also say that, you know, I would have to make an intelligent decision. I can't just make a random decision.
You have gangs in your ward.
What? Go right ahead and answer.
Do you have gangs in your ward?
I'm going to say, I don't know if we have gangs or not, but do we have crime in our ward? Yes. Is it drug related? Yes. Are there people, do I go to court and go to the sentencing hearings? Yes. And do we have enough police in our ward? No. You know, is there a lot of improvements I'd like to make in our ward? Yes. You know, I don't disagree. We're on the same page. We're just, I don't feel that I can cut either of these programs without having a lot more information. And again, I don't think that there may not be places in here that would make sensible cuts. But I would need time. I was under a different impression when I was called this meeting today.
Well, Alderman, I did mention it, and I tried to make sure that we were all informed. I said that I mentioned to us this morning about the technical changes, and I also said that we'll possibly be opening this up, where we will open it up for some additional today from other members of the committee. I did mention that.
And I may not have, maybe subjective hearing. I thought that's what we were here for. And again, if I would have known, I would have been looking a little bit more over the weekend and making calls.
There are a number of things in here that I know we have discussed that I was really thinking that we would send a letter along with anything that we send back to ENA. One that we heard in the public hearing about the was the Velodrome, the bicycle that is in Penrose, correct? That we would send some statement about that. One, that we heard it from the public, and two, that we want that to be looked at, to find something at some point. The restoration of the ward capital, the restoration of public safety dollars. I've heard us talk about that, and so I wanted to kind of put that in writing to ENA as well. So we can make those kinds of recommendations without necessarily doing the cuts to them. And I would say that would be a way to go at this point. I'm just hearing from Alderwoman Marlene Davis saying that the Grand Center, the $60,000 for that is subsidy to artists who cannot afford the rental rates in Grand Center. And then that has significance. So I know it's a tight schedule when we get this budget at the beginning of May and have to get something out by the end of June. It's a very tight schedule. I have one other. I want to go to one question though from Paul Payne. Does ENA have a public process in their review of the budget?
We do have a public hearing on the budget when it's first heard at the beginning of the ENA's deliberations.
And that's typically when?
That's usually a couple days after we have the presentation, so it'd be around the third week of April.
There may be some kind of way that this committee could jointly do that with them in some kind of way. I don't know. How was it attended this past time?
It's not typically attended very well.
But we consider the public. Can we come in?
Well, I'm thinking of something slightly different where this committee could join in with that to make that a larger type of hearing like what we had. And so I'm seeing some other ways of this process that we can get involved as Ways and Means in this Board of Aldermen earlier, so we have more time to really consider the budget and look at it more thoroughly to be able to make recommendations so that at the end we're not just, cutting and trying to do things with the pressure of having to get this done before the 1st of July. So I see a number of ways that I wanted to have further discussions with the committee on and our interaction with ENA. So with that in mind, you had something else, and then we'll go to Vaccaro. Thank you.
Yeah, well, one thing for Paul Payne. Sorry, up and down, up and down. Several years ago, it was created by the board a Citizens Advisory Committee.
Yes,
Does that exist anymore?
It's not active today, no. That's been a number of years ago.
Why was it dispersed, or why?
Well, that you're talking about it was for advisory committee for capital spending,
right?
And at the time, going back, there were no longer funds for discretionary funds. If you look at our budget, it's all debt service, so it's not a matter of.
Wouldn't that include also ward capital?
Since I wasn't involved with it that clearly back then when it was active, I'm not sure they discussed whether the ward cap was, whether they discussed how the ward cap should be spent. Typically, it was the alderman that made that deliberation, and we incorporate what they deliberate for each individual wards into that budget. But I suppose that could be.
Okay. But wouldn't that committee, if it was still existed, also work with you guys before you make the recommendation to cut the ward capital funds in the budget?
They could, but I think you're not deliberating then on where capital money should be spent. You're deliberating then on how much capital is there. And I think you almost have to take the budget as a whole, similar to when I presented here at the beginning of this process. It's a matter of identifying the overall budget gap and the steps we've taken to meet it. And obviously deferring of capital expenditures has been one of those ways we've been meeting the budget gap.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then my last comment, and this is in reference to what Alderman Vaccaro was saying. Just to be clear on what we're doing, the amendment number 3 is a recommendation to increase. It is possible for you, if you don't feel comfortable, to vote on the recommendation to ENA to increase and then not vote for the cuts, if that would help you.
And that was some of my point. We can make a number of recommendations and not identify all the cuts, because there are other concerns like the restoration of the ward capital. So that was part of my point to you. Alderman Vaccaro.
My question, Paul, you probably want to answer it. If we only make recommendations and we don't make real changes to the budget, does it go back to ENA or does it go out to the floor?
If you are recommending an increase, obviously you can't increase it without ENA approval, so that would be a recommendation that would go back to ENA.
But we're not recommending cuts. If we're recommending basically for them to find funding back for something, it would go back to them. It wouldn't go.
Well,
we're not making no real change to the budget.
Well, right now you would, simply because we do have those the detail, the ward account detail that we've added to the budget there. So that just by virtue of that, that would require ENA approval.
Okay.
So you're adding line items basically.
Then I am fine with the increases, just not the decreases. But I'm fine with the recommendations.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Alderman Moore stepped out for a moment.
Yes, he did. Okay, then. Yeah, if you can. Let's see if we can get it. We're going to go find Alderman Moore so he can be in on it. We can make it. Don't worry about that.
I'm fine with 3. It's just 2 and 3.
Ask them to increase it by $634,000.
But see, I wanted to make it. You sure you don't want to make a? I believe we're ready to entertain a motion for Amendment 3.
I make a motion on Board Bill 3.
Amendment number 3.
Amendment 3.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded pass out amendment, to adopt Amendment 3.
We restate this, so we're all-
Right, which would be the
The 100.
increase from 500,000 to 635,000 is the corrected version.
Correct.
Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderwoman Cruzen,
Aye.
Alderwoman Florida,
No.
Alderwoman Behringer,
I know. If we can't increase capital.
Vice Chairman Williamson.
Aye.
Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderman French.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro.
Aye.
Alderman Carter. Chairman Kennedy.
Aye.
Alderwoman Behringer.
Aye.
7 yes votes, 1 no vote. Amendment number 3 passes.
Okay, then. We're not dealing with the others at this point.
Okay.
Do we want to communicate to ENA our concerns about ward capital? I could put that in writing. We're fine with that. I'll do that. It's whether we'd like to see that restored.
And Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I consider, and, okay, I understand the public safety fund is important, but we need demolition restored. That should have been, I'm sorry, I'm going to should on us. The demolition fund is hugely critical to stabilizing our neighborhoods.
Right.
And it was cut by $2 million. So in my mind, that's the priority of the day.
Okay.
And our capital.
So we can place that into writing to them also?
I would like you to
If
to
that's
make that recommendation.
fine with the committee.
Thank you.
I would also like to put in writing to them at least that we heard from the public about the
Velodrome.
Yeah.
velodrome,
Velodrome. in
that we
Penrose
heard
Park.
that as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Not that I'm opposed.
Anything else that we need to include in communications to them? Nothing? With, surely we could. Surely we could. We could ask them to come to a meeting, definitely. But I would still want to put it in writing to them, and then we can call them in. We have to send a letter anyway, so we'll do that. So it's no other action we need to take for today?
No, we need to make a motion that we send.
That we send it on to ENA. We can entertain a motion now to send the budget with these changes to ENA.
So move.
There's a second? Been moved and seconded that we send the budget on to ENA with the amendments. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderwoman Cruzen,
Aye.
Alderwoman Florida,
Aye.
Alderwoman Behringer.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Williamson.
Aye.
Alderman Moore. Alderman French.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Carter, Chairman Kennedy.
Aye.
8 aye votes. It will now be sent to ENA.
Now we'll formally send this to ENA. I'd like to thank the committee. We know we have to come back together one other time on the budget when it's sent back over, if there are any other changes to it. But I think that we have started a new process, and I appreciate your indulgence and your participation. Really, I think we've done a good job. Thank you.